Welcome everyone to this evening's webinar. My name is Sophia, responsible for curating learning events for you at Spectrum. So for those of you who are new to Spectrum, we are located at Duo Tower, Bugis. So we promote a learning-focused culture. We have a shared premium workspaces for you to work from, events and meetings, solutions for you to, hold your sessions, and also the connections to expand businesses. So I'm very excited today to have this esteemed panelists with us who are Spectrum members in the community to talk about shifting gears for the future of work. So let me introduce all the panelists here today. First up is Azmul Haq, founder and MD of Collier Law, tri-qualified lawyer, qualified and admitted to practice law in England, India, and Singapore. His expertise is in complex cross-border corporate transactions, commercial contracts, and regulatory matters for startups and billion-dollar enterprises over the last 19 years. So Collier Law itself is founded by experienced big law lawyers, best known for cradle to exit support for tech companies and venture investors. And next, I'm happy to introduce Evelyn Chow. She's the founder and principal consultant of Decode HR. She has a decade of experience in corporate human resources roles across Asia within the IT, hospitality, and real estate sectors. She works with clients to develop strategies and programs in strategic workforce planning, competency frameworks development, talent acquisition, compensation benefits, talent management, and leadership management. So Decode HR provides strategic advice and high-impact HR solutions, whose forte is leveraging technology to strengthen human capital. So next up, John Paul Chen, or JP as we fondly call him, Group CEO of Apollo Entertainment Media. He is tasked with launching family exhibition events in Southeast Asia, Australia, Taiwan, and China. So he's a chartered accountant by training and previously worked at General Electric and MES before joining the world of startups and tech. Apollo Entertainment Media is based in Singapore with focus on live concerts and family entertainment events and exhibitions in Southeast Asia. So last but never the least, who best to moderate a session is Chris Mcpherson, Spectrum's international CEO. With more than 25 years experience of regional leadership and management experience, he helps achieve Spectrum's vision of building a globally connected ecosystem. And with a successful track record in leading high-growth tech startups to regional companies, Chris has deep knowledge of the APAC region as well. So audience, take this opportunity to post your questions onto the platform here. They will address after the 40-minute discussion. So without further ado, over to you, Chris. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Sophia. And let me add my welcome also to Evelyn, JP, and Azmul. And thanks for being part of the session today.
Pleasure.
Glad to be here.
Thank you.
Great.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Let's get straight into it. The lessons learned during the COVID period bring sharp focus to human resource trends that have been evolving for years. Such trends include, but certainly not limited to, well-being, reskilling, workforce strategies, and the role of HR within organizations, irrespective of the size of those organizations. These lessons reinforce the need to build the human element into everything an organization does in order to create lasting value for workers, organizations, and society at large. As teams continue to work from home, all of us as team leaders have become the organization's lifeline, irrespective of where the team leader fits in the organization. It's become their responsibility and our responsibility to not only focus on outcomes and plan the work accordingly, but also to think about the personal situations that matter culturally and certainly foster trust in the organizations. Team leaders have had to display empathy, listening skills, create the trust of their teams, as well as the ability to communicate, manage, and lead. Big asks of individuals who are also suffering during this period of time. If they have not been able to transition and display these characteristics, then work has suffered, or at times maybe didn't even get done. Going forward, leaders and teams at all levels must develop capabilities that enable them to work and lead effectively while supporting the personal needs of their team and representing the organisation's culture. We need to treat the work situation over the past 18 months as a shortcut that showed us how to move to our desired destination, a place where we're not just surviving, but actually thriving. So with that in mind, my first question goes to Evelyn tonight. And so tell us, Evelyn, about your experience over the past 12 months and what are some of the mechanisms that you have instigated for yourself to cope with the new environment?
Sure. You know, just now when Sophia was introducing the webinar, for some reason, the topic, right, shifting gears suddenly hit me. And I feel like I've been a race driver for the last 18 months. And I'm waiting for that pit stop. But I think so much has happened. It's a collision of all the different things that you have just described, Chris. And suddenly it's like, whoa, we went through so much, you know, and we are at this point now. And I think when I look back at some of the decisions that we made, you know, and decisions that we made as a team and as a leader, as a part of the leadership team, I think one of the things that we very quickly leveraged was technology. And I think that's because it's an easy answer in some ways. You know, you reach for something that can address very specific needs. So we did that. We leveraged technology heavily, whether it was collaboration tools, meeting tools, any sort of tools. You know, we explored. I think the good thing was that we've actually been strong advocates of technology right from the start. So having more of it, you know, and using it better wasn't really the challenge. So over time, I think the challenge that stood out for me was really about how I can continue to keep the team engaged. How can we maintain a really good level of collaboration? And how can we engage well with our clients? You know, you can't travel and you have so many more restrictions. So I think the people element actually hit me a lot harder in the last perhaps 6 months, because that's when I realized that you really need time together as a team. You really need to be enjoying each other as team members in order to keep going in an environment that has become so demanding. So I think those were some of the very apparent things. So we rolled out things like rolling out like a buddy system, you know, mentorship. We want to be able to offer that a lot more, wellness programs. So we were thinking a lot more about how can we increase that connection, high touch, in an environment where you can't really see each other as much. So smaller teams coming together. Still thinking about that.
Great. Well, thank you. And I'm sure we'll touch on the buddy system later on as well. And moving on to Asmal. Asmal, how are you coping with the situation?
Thanks, Chris. I think I feel like I'm in a movie. The movie is called The Great Gatsby. You remember the scene from Baz Luhrmann's movie where you're in Jay Gatsby's ballroom. You know, you have these gilded curving staircases, fantastic lofty columns. Everyone's dressed really well and everyone's drinking and dancing. And then the game we're playing is musical chairs. So essentially when the music stops, you have to find a chair. And you know, if you don't find a chair, you're out. The problem is the music doesn't stop, but someone's pressed pause on this big music button. So, you know, we're all in this, I would say this sort of in-between phase where we're not quite sure if the music's going to stop or if the music's going to start playing again, as it did. We're never sure if we're going back to the old normal. And that's part of the problem, I suppose, that we're all in. You know, we all have to adapt. We all have to sort of, you know, think about the future of work, amongst other things. I like Evelyn's analogy of the race car driver waiting for a pit stop. I just sort of feel we need a bit more certainty in all of us, in some ways, of how long we will be in this, you know, pause button phase. So that's sort of my initial reaction to your question.
Great. Well, I like the analogy of when the music stops and where will we find ourselves. JP, what about some of the issues that you've had to grapple with during the same period, and what maybe are some of the behavioural changes that you've had to implement personally?
Thanks for that, Chris. And I love the two analogies that came in, and they're spot on. It's sort of, we're in this limbo phase at the moment. I think me personally, as a leader in there, sort of had to adjust the way we communicate with our teams, how we set up our day, our meetings, and our work, and it sort of changed everything. So we've sort of gone back to like first principle theory and just basically just said, okay, how do we operate effectively, or how do I operate effectively? And then with the changing of, I guess, the regulations and the measures, it sort of is a moving target as well, right? So there's a lot of variables that are in play. And so we decided to focus on really just anchoring on the human element of it. And we can't forget that in human resource, the human element is really very important. We're all just humans at the end of the day, and saying hello, good morning, good evening, finding the chance, when it's safe to meet up with your teammates. Those are really important, and just being human as well. But I think in coping the whole process, it's sort of having to be very positive about the whole thing as well, because as leaders, as sort of people that the company looks up to for direction and for that guidance, we sort of want to maintain that focus, but also have that human touch and that positivity to sort of encourage each other to soldier through this really uncertain pause button time.
Yeah, thank you for that. And certainly the personal element is critical during this period of time. I think we've all touched
Absolutely.
on that. And at the start of the pandemic, most organizations' focus was making key decisions on essential services, putting a lot of procedures in place for remote working, and also working out from a personal perspective how to keep teams motivated. So Evelyn, you talked a little bit about the buddy system and using technology. What are some of the other activities that you also implemented during this time?
Well, I think actually some of the activities that we've given more thought to are actually social activities, not so much work activities. Although apart from our fortnightly meetings, what we have actually decided to do is to have smaller team meetings. And that's because we feel that, with smaller teams, it allows people to interact at a more intimate level, and also allows them to do, more interesting stuff together, whether it's, brainstorming and just discussing ideas, which sometimes can be harder in a larger group. So we're thinking of how we can structure some of our work meetings in a more informal manner, and also augmenting that with smaller social meetings. So what we've also tried to do is to encourage teams to catch up, like in pairs where possible. And during the period where we could actually meet up in person, what we tried to do was also to introduce a new, what we call a beverage refreshment. And that was to encourage people to catch up over coffee and to meet in person, because it's so easy to get comfortable just meeting behind Zoom or WhatsApp, and that was the one thing that I must say was sort of keeping me awake. I was thinking about how can we maintain that level of collaboration in the midst of all these restrictions and challenges that we were facing. So that's what we've been up to. We welcome more ideas.
Yeah, I like the idea of coffee sessions, I think, or whatever drink you happen to choose. JP, what are some of the methodologies that you've adjusted to with your team at the same time?
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, I think Evelyn sort of hit the nail on the head. Just sort of social elements. I think we take for granted the fact that previously, pre-COVID, if people still remember it, sort of being in proximity to each other, we take that for granted, because there is that sort of one-liner or two-liners that builds relationships throughout the day. But we don't get that nowadays. It's sort of leave the meeting in your Zoom and you're done. Go back to doing what you're doing as a silo or an isolated person. And so we've placed a lot of emphasis on social interactions. Exercise was a good one. I think I commended the team for sort of coming together and doing runs and swims together. They're not really the athletic type, so I was like, wow, right, this is great. And we all know chemically as well, it sort of boosts the morale so it was a double boost, them doing an activity together and exercising. I thought it was great, as well as sort of eating and catching up over a meal. I think the emphasis was definitely on less on like sort of, oh, we got to work on this together, but more on like, how are you? Again, the human element and just caring for one another, which sort of builds that trust and camaraderie in the team, which was something that we had to adjust post-COVID. Yeah, so that's some of the positives that sort of came out of it. I think the challenges were when COVID started, everyone just jumped on the bandwagon of just Zoom calls, one after the other, sort of back to back, like 8 to 10 calls. I've done it and it doesn't work. It probably drives you crazy more than anything. And so we adjusted from a 10 Zoom calls a day with no break to something that's a bit of a balance. And I think that's us being adaptable and trying to find that balance across the teams now. Yeah.
The exercise as a team and working together that way, it sounds a good way of working.
Absolutely.
And, yeah. Asmal, what are some of the cultural changes that Collier has experienced over that 12 months? And what are some of the implementation ideas that you've gone through during the same period?
Right. So, Chris, I think we've been trying to, I suppose, make sure that, while we are socially distant, we're not emotionally distant as far as possible. So one of the things we did very early on was we had this regular culture of catching up for a meal and some beverages every quarter. So we made sure we still had those, but obviously in compliance with the rules. So I think at one point of time we went to two different tables, separated by this big chasm, but we still managed to get a picture of everyone from a distance. So we had proof that we were sort of together and we did this together. So it's things like that. I think it's really important to make people feel that sense of community, that they're part of a bigger team. They're just not working by themselves, or they don't have all these burdens and responsibilities by themselves. But the other thing we've done is we've also used technology in a way to replicate that feeling of what we would have done had we all been in the same office and sitting next to each other and working. So to give you an example, we had a culture of having everyone wish everyone else on their work anniversaries when you finished a year or 2 years in the firm, and also on your birthday. Now, that happens very easily when you walk into the office and you see somebody having got flowers or gifts, and you kind of get into it. But how do you remind people about that when you're not in the office? So we found an app, and I won't mention the name of the app because I might be promoting them. But it's an app that allows you to put in the anniversaries, whether it's birthdays, whether it's work anniversaries, and it automatically sends a reminder to everyone other than the person whose birthday or anniversary it is. So you can quickly get onto that electronic card and write a message, and you can write very, true to technology. You're allowed to use emojis. You're allowed to use what is it called, memes. So it sort of becomes a really fun thing. It replaces the physical greeting card, which everyone would write, their messages and would sign. But we've just replaced that with an electronic version of that. So that's just an example of how we, I suppose, try to adapt and keep up with the culture that we have. But it's required us to be really innovative, I guess.
Yeah, I think innovation being the key word that everybody talks about, and thinking outside of the box. And so in relationship to work changes, a lot's been mentioned recently in the press and amongst HR leaders on flexibility. And in this context, it goes beyond working from home. It's also about performance outcomes, KPIs, and objectives. So, JP, how have you managed to track and measure key results and outcomes with the team, and at the same time, keeping the team motivated and engaged?
Yeah, I think it's something that is sort of, we still track them online with the things that we're doing, but I think it's more the day-to-day that was sort of the focus that I was looking at. And we've got some sort of younger and newer members that came in, and I guess performance comes after. It's sort of how do we train them and train them well and sort of mentor them and retool or reskill them so that they perform to the abilities that we have. So rather than focusing on sort of the lag indicators, we sort of want to understand how do we create a process of training and coming together. So we what Evelyn said was sort of breaking out into small groups. I think that's really important because they become more effective. There's a sort of a more in-depth process, and it looks like we're siloing, but we're actually not. We're just sort of coming together and having that deep training. So that sort of changed the way we do things, because normally we take it for granted. We just all sort of come together or book a meeting room, but now we sort of had to do it remotely. And so, and I think Zoom has one of those ways of sort of breaking out into groups as well that we've used before. So sort of these little things that sort of help track that. I think generally speaking, I've been fortunate. My team is sort of very very independent and able to do the things that need to do. So we don't really have the problem of that. It's more the training and maybe tracking some of the sort of weekly KPIs that we sort of have to do as a Zoom call. It's less effective. It's a longer Zoom call period, but I guess that's just some of the things that have to happen and change during this period.
And just following on from there, Evelyn, obviously coming from Decode HR and from an HR perspective, and also dealing with some of your clients, how do you see the shift overall in the market? And how are your clients and how's the market coping?
I'll share from my perspective, in terms of how the firm is coping with that first, then I'll share a little bit more about how we are interacting with our clients. I think one thing that's been very clear to me is that the vision of the company and the direction of our firm has to be as clear as possible. And I know that's challenging in the face of a very complex and ambiguous environment, increasingly so. But I think it's important to spend quite a lot of time crystallizing that in our own heads, right? And working that through with the team, because I feel that it's really critical that, especially in the face of, so much uncertainty and change, rapid change, that we need to be as clear as we can in terms of where we're heading. So the direction I feel is critical. I don't expect us to have all the answers, and I think that's reasonable. But I think there has to be some level of clarity so that we can communicate to our teams. And so the teams then would be very secure in the knowledge that, that, okay, this is where we are headed for now. And this is how we're going to actually craft, our action plans. So I think that's very important. So I think more than ever, the clarity of the leadership has to be something that we need to pay a lot of attention to, and how we communicate. And the other piece is around execution. Execution is key as well. So we need to think very clearly about how we're going to translate that vision into reality. So again, I think the team would benefit hugely from that. I'm not saying that you do that alone. I'm saying that involve the team. So I think that helps in the way we then work with our clients as well. I think that clarity from us and that certainty, as to how we will deliver our services, and the support that they will continue to get from our teams, the focus that they will get from our teams, I think is very important. So I think if our teams are very well supported, and to JP's point, equipped, and they get the training and the support they need, the clients will feel it, the clients will know it. And I think then it also translates into the kind of questions that you ask your clients as to how you can support them better. And I think when you, as an organization, as the service provider, have gone through that thought process of understanding as much as you can about the landscape and about ecosystem, and understanding that for your clients as well, I think that helps them to know that they're in good hands, because you're looking long term. You're looking at something that is not probably as visible or overt at this point, and you are involving them in that journey. you're asking the right questions, I think they will feel like they're well taken care of. They know they're in good hands.
Thank you for that.
Without saying too much.
Obviously, I mean, I understand you've got to talk about the broader picture, but certainly I think when you talk about the clear directions, both for your team as well as clients, that helps a lot. And as more from a lawyer's perspective, time is of the essence when it comes to deliverables. How has this new flexibility of work styles, not just working from home, but the whole performance outcomes affected a law practice? And what are some of the mechanisms that you've implemented? You talked about technology from a broader perspective, but some of the mechanisms you've implemented to adjust to these new norms?
Right. So, Chris, it's been, to be honest, the pandemic and I suppose the inability to commute to the office has in some ways made us more productive because you don't have that travel time. You don't obviously have the time that you spend in the morning getting ready. You sort of only do, what's called upward dressing. I think in terms of how that affects us, we're a beneficiary in terms of it does save time, and for lawyers, you're right, time is money, but it's only effective if your clients are actually paying you for that additional time. So there's a bit of I feel what the pandemic has done is it's sort of given everyone a sense of you're always there, for me. So it's perfectly fine to send you a Zoom invite for a call at 8 p.m. because, what else could you be doing? But for goodness sake, you're not on a plane, you're not on a holiday, so just get on the call. And I find that sometimes frustrating, but it is, it is what it is. So in terms of getting our lawyers to be more productive, I think that's easily done. What's more critical for us is to how do we monetize that additional time we spend by demonstrating to the client that actually this is to your benefit, and there's a real value proposition here when we can literally sort of work around the clock to get your transactions done quicker, right? In some cases, the legal paperwork, we've closed some deals in literally like in a few days, rather than weeks as it took previously. So that's been, it's been good from a revenue point of view, but obviously you have to, be able to convince your clients that they should pay a little more for that, compared to what they used to. I missed your second question, Chris. Could you repeat that?
Yeah, it was just really touching on some of the mechanisms that you've implemented
Right, got it.
In adjusting to these changes.
Got it. So in terms of technology, we have been quite fortunate to be agile because we're a small organization, just a team of 12. So we're able to decide quickly and implement things fairly quickly. We had Zoom accounts for the firm, but we went ahead and got Zoom and Teams and wherever else required anything else, any other software, any other application that would make people more productive, because you weren't seeing everyone in the office, and you still had to have that semblance of collaboration and actually make sure that things got done. So I think we've used a few tools, quite a few new softwares that we've purchased enterprise licenses for the firm to sort of make it more productive in a sort of really digital working environment. And we've had to train ourselves, I suppose. You don't really have an IT manager like you used to in the old days, who would come in and who you would turn to for help for everything other than putting on your computer. I think that's been a dramatic change in terms of what COVID has done to our approach to becoming familiar with information technology, with things that are digital, learning how to use apps, learning how to become more productive as an individual, and sort of manage your own time better in a way. Because if you didn't schedule those ways to even take time off from work, it could affect your productivity. It could affect your mental health. So it's been really quite a bit of innovative thinking around what works for us as an organization, and let's go out and get it, and let's learn how to use these tools because we absolutely need to do that to survive.
Yeah, I think you touched on two very important key elements too. One certainly being the boundaries, and that's something that's come out in a lot of reports recently. Is setting boundaries at the time that you do start work and the time that you do finish work. Otherwise, working from home, it becomes the same place where you eat, you sleep, you work, and your entertainment as well. So boundaries become a bigger aspect altogether. You touched on that slightly. Also, I think just touching on the business itself and looking at our clients, and I know that Evelyn, you touched on clients, but JP, from your perspective, many of the activities that you're involved with in the media and entertainment industry obviously are related to major shows, exhibitions. So how do you see the current situation affecting the business, your teams as well, and what are some of the changes you've had to make to adjust to sustainability?
Thanks for that, Chris. Yeah, I'll try and shorten the question because it's a tough one in the sense that we have had a tough time. But instead of sort of just the end consumer, which we obviously haven't had the chance to sort of roll out a show during this pandemic, we've sort of worked a lot with our partners, right? Whether they are brand owners or sort of within our supply chain. We've sort of come together because as we've sort of caught up with them, either on Zoom or over a coffee, we've sort of just worked together because of the industry being in such a tight spot. We've sort of come together as one group to sort of help each other, whether it's to save costs or to build economies of scale or share things and move around. It's sort of working together in an industry that usually is quite competitive. And I think that was a really good thing for us because it's a natural consolidation of our. I think you haven't been able to sort of roll out any shows, so we also have spent a lot of time sort of building that relationship, just really understanding some of our partners as we go along, understanding the landscape. Partners include sort of working with Enterprise Singapore or Singapore Tourism Board, who very much focus on the SMM measures, and working with them as a dialogue rather than just as a submission to try and get something going. And that has really been an eye-opener for us as a team, because it's sort of, this will become that new norm in terms of how much measures, how many things that we do, in terms of attractions and operating capacity. And so we've been really focused on that and communicating that as a dialogue rather than with a government agency, you sort of focus on a submission. So the dialogues have been great, and that sort of fostered that better working relationship across our ecosystem, because it's a tough ask for what we're going through right now.
Yeah, it's interesting how some of your competitors have become your partners. And obviously, as the industry is going through a change.
Yeah, definitely.
And so, Evelyn, Decode HR has always been about using technology to enhance the HR industry practices. So during this period of time, we've touched a lot about technology, but do you see technology adoption faster in the HR sector? Both, I think, with obviously your business has always been focused very much on technology, but what about the sector overall?
I think that's definitely, a yes, as in we've seen companies embracing technology actually probably at an unprecedented rate. And you're talking about companies of all sizes, not just smaller organizations, SMEs or startups. I think nowadays, when you speak to any company, they are very conscious of the fact that they need to be embracing of technology. So I think that's been a great development, right, through what we've been seeing. And I think the other thing is that on the other end of the scale, you have companies that have already been very progressive and are already adopting fairly sophisticated technology. So now they are actually looking at something that is, at the next level. So we're talking about, at the level of analytics, the use of AI. So you're talking about something that is of a different scale. And I think the appetite for that level of technology is growing, which is great. So we are very excited because quite a number of our partners are in that space, in the AI space, and we are working very closely with them as well. And we feel that with the challenges that we are facing today, where distance, will continue to remain a challenge, it also presents new opportunities because companies are now very open to hiring from anywhere in the world virtually. So you're not actually limited by geography anymore. And in a way, you can look globally for the best people for your company. They don't actually have to be in the same office as you. So these are great opportunities. But it also means that the technology that you are leveraging has to be able to meet that level of utilization. So I think, these are great opportunities. We are a believer of ethical AI. So, and I think there are many companies out there that actually operate, with those philosophies. So I think that's awesome for us as a country as well. Singapore, as all of us would know, the government is a huge advocate of technology. And so I think we are in actually a really great position today with so much support, so many good options out there. So I think it's just a matter of having the right mindset, making sure you get the right understanding of the different types of products out there, and paying a lot of attention to change management implementation, because that's all about people. You don't want to fail at that point, when the company has already made such a huge decision to invest in, that level of technology. So I think we are really excited truly to see that clients, prospects have such great ambitions. It's great.
Great, thank you for that. And it's interesting to see, the industry moving to AI, and also, as you touched on, it doesn't matter where somebody lives these days. The world's become a lot smaller in this environment as well.
For sure.
Asmal, just touching on the law environment, obviously, a lot of that is built on personal relationships, and therefore client relationships are very personal. So working remotely, what have been some of the challenges that you've had to overcome? Obviously, we talked on technology before, but some of the other challenges to overcome to create that still personal relationship continuing.
Right. So, Chris, great question. I mean, it's not ideal, of course, in the sort of in-between phase, right, that we're in, where the pause button has been pressed. Fortunately for us, when we started the firm in October 2015, we had a very clear focus on our client segment and our client sort of, what sectors of the economy were they're in. And while most lawyers do describe themselves as being practice area focused, in other words, I'm a real estate lawyer, I'm an M&A lawyer, or I'm an IP lawyer, we decided to, have another categorization. And I suppose what we do is a mesh of that, right? There's the practice area expertise, and there's the sort of industry focus, which is which intersperses with. And the industry focus for us has been across the board. It's a segment of tech. So it's tech for financial services and therefore fintech. For healthcare and for pharma, it's digital health that we focus on, rather than just big pharma or big healthcare. So what's happened as a result is because we had that focus and that sort of very clear, almost by design of the clients we were representing, we were very familiar with their industry and the problems, right, that they were having. So in a way, it did not need us to do too much time, in what we call a beauty parade. Right. So in other words, we didn't have to go and do those physical meetings and, come to boardrooms and certainly not bring credential statements printed on glossy paper. That used to happen when I started my career about 20 years ago. I think it's really, really not required. What clients need, when they're appointing a lawyer is a trusted advisor. They need somebody who, of course, knowledge of the law and expertise goes without saying, but they need somebody who also is commercially savvy and understands their industry and understands how to solve a problem, right? At the end of the day, we're all solving problems, and that's why we get paid for our time. So fortunately, that's not difficult to do, even without pressing the flesh, in a physical meeting, because you have digital marketing. You're allowed to demonstrate your thought leadership on fantastic channels like LinkedIn. It's really been good for us in a way, because we're able to show where we're relevant. We're sort of knowledgeable about the things that affect our clients, not just the legal stuff, and therefore we're top of mind, if you like, when it comes to a client thinking about, all right, I need a lawyer for advice on how data protection laws in Singapore affect my business model, because I'm collecting all of this data and I don't know if I'm breaching the rules or not. Or it could be a question on I need to raise venture financing, but I have these convertible notes from like 5 years ago and no one's ever looked at it. So what do I do when I need to? So it's sort of staying relevant and staying top of mind is fortunately not difficult in a digital age. You just have to be, you sort of need to know where to be, right, and sort of where to hang out, what online channels to be on, or how do you demonstrate your expertise more effectively in this sort of I suppose you could call it the digital era that we all live in. We're still not post-COVID yet. Don't know how much that's going to change. I certainly hope physical meetings will happen at some point of time. Like, we're social animals, so we absolutely need to meet in person. But I think for the law firm, it's not really been a problem to raise, to bring in new clients or to increase the amount of work we're doing. Because we found the relevant mechanisms to deal with this.
Great, thank you. But as you said, there are coping mechanisms, but we're still all personal. And so it comes back to the original conversations that we all started off with as well, is that personal relationship is critical for our teams as well as for our clients. And so it's getting back to that situation where we can have those one-to-one, one-to-a-few meetings where business continues. But obviously, there are practices that we can put in place in the meantime. So my final question is based on a Mercer study of 2021 will see companies transition from a return to normal phase to a reinvention phase. So the question to each of you, Evelyn, JP, and Asmal, is how do you see a reinvention phase for your business? And as we're talking about shifting gears for the future of work, what are some of the innovative practices of how you see this being implemented within your organization? So, Evelyn, would you like to start?
Sure. That's a good question. And I probably would like to look at it from more of a people perspective. Because in terms of the technology side of things, I think we have a pretty clear idea as to the direction that we want to move towards, which is essentially, embracing different types of technology probably at a more sophisticated level. But I think on the people side of things, it does mean that we are very keen to look at, teams of people, talent outside of Singapore. Mm-hmm. And I think that's also partly driven by factors, that emerge from this entire episode. It's made us a lot more aware of the kind of talent pool that we can access as a firm, and that's what I've shared earlier, in terms of embracing a global talent pool. So I think that is something that we are now very excited about, And I think when you utilize the right technology, whether it's interviewing, selection technology, assessments tools, and so on, because you have such fantastic video interviewing technology anyway, there's nothing to stop you from making great decisions. And then from there on, working as a team, with team collaboration tools and everything out there, again, there's nothing to stop you from succeeding working with remote teams. So I think that's the direction that we're very excited to move towards, and I think that also means then that you have bigger markets that you can pursue.
Great, thank you. So JP.
Thanks for that, Chris. Yeah, I think in terms of the technology, it's sort of finding the right technology that we have, because there is so many sort of options out there, and sort of piecing them all together, because some of them are not sort of compatible with each other, and we're finding that balance of sort of bringing them all together, number one, as a team. And I agree with Evelyn. It's sort of for our industry, sort of, because we do regional sort of scalable family exhibitions that tour around, working with teams remotely, or even competitors, right, together in different countries, and working on our strengths in those countries remotely, and sort of with the brands and the shows and the exhibitions that we have, working with them to sort of share that IP, or share that brand as we tour around. And so that technology sort of facilitates that, and that sort of gives us that scalability, or that regional presence nearly automatically, because of COVID, despite not traveling or not being able to travel. And then that focuses us on our attention really to sort of building relationships, either remotely or using the time that we have face to face, which is precious, on building deeper relationships with our colleagues, our managers, our upline, and also empowering sort of the mid managers to have that human skill set to work with their teams, right? Because that's really important. It's sort of, before that, you can have a town hall and sort of the CEO comes in and we can sort of meet everybody. But now, sort of, because we work in teams or in breakout groups, we should be able to empower a lot of our mid managers to sort of have that skill set. So I expect us to have sort of that training, but that humanistic training of sort of bringing that team together, not just on a business and KPI sort of outcome based, but rather on a human element, on a social element, and bonding together on that front. So these are sort of the ways that we're sort of changing and innovating in our businesses. And I think that sort of can apply to the other businesses as well, in some degree, shape, and form. But yeah, it's sort of really working together and sort of everyone taking responsibility for that workload to build that relationship. Definitely.
Yeah, I think the idea of strategic alliances, resonates with us a lot.
Absolutely. Yeah, spot on.
Yeah, I think one thing that's come through that you've both mentioned a lot is partnerships, and that strategic alliances or partners, or even the whole vertical chain of go-to-market. Everybody relying and supporting each other has been. You've seen a lot of that change during this period as well, because everybody's in the same bucket.
Yeah.
Yes, we are.
For sure.
Asmal.
Yeah, so Chris, one of the things I'd like to do is actually build an app for surge pricing for lawyers, especially the clients who email you at 9 p.m. To require something the next day. So I'm only half serious, with that. We are trying to do something about that problem. But what I'd really like to do is, I really think, every obstacle is really an opportunity in disguise. And this is no different. There will be a shakedown, for sure. It's happening in certain industries. And I think it will be the innovative companies that are also stronger about being able to be agile, being able to adapt towards the future that will survive. What are we doing specifically in relation to that? I think we're looking at how we're able to be we're able to utilize the gig economy model a bit more effectively so that we can provide a borderless service. You know how legal services tends to be very jurisdictional in terms of the laws of a particular country, and that's obviously very relevant. But at the same time, a lot of what we do and a lot of what the world is seeing today is really cross-border. It is a globalized world, and I think the need for a globalized legal service is probably the sort of the holy grail, right? if you like. In a way, that's difficult to do across all markets, but it's not impossible if you were to pick particular markets that are key to the delivery of your legal services, and that's one of the things we're looking at. I think given how much we focus on tech, we're trying to see across all the major centers, the tech centers of the world, where you have startups, where you have early stage companies, and where you have innovation happening in a big way. Are we able to have a service, whether it's remotely delivered, whether it's obviously it's going to have some boots on the ground, but we're probably able to approach that with a sort of different mindset and with slightly different tools than we were able to even 2 years ago. So really looking forward to that and watch this space.
Great. Well, thank you. Well, I think thank you very much to each of you, Evelyn, Asmal, and JP. What I take away from there, some key words actually. Personalization came out, and being personal. I think globalization was another one. Partnerships, and obviously technology and innovation. So thank you very much. I will ask you if you've got any last words that each of you would like to say before we open it up for any questions. So any last statements? All right, well, I'll take that as a given then. Sorry, Evelyn, you've gone off mute there. Would you like to say something? Oh,
no, I was just going to say that, even coming together like what we're doing now, it's a great way of demonstrating, that partnership that we spoke about.
Yeah, partnership's very strong. Okay, so we'll open up if anybody has any questions they'd like to ask any of the panelists. There is one question here specifically for Collier, but I actually think that this is appropriate for all, and it's asked by a person by the name of Marie. How do you keep your team motivated and yourself motivated when you yourself may be suffering from COVID fatigue? I think that's a good question for everyone.
Yeah, I'm sure all of you would have your own answers, but my short answer to that is listen to the inner you. Whatever the inner you wants. It could be a quick break doing 15 minutes of yoga. It could be something else, catching up on a news show or something that you enjoy doing. Always give yourself the time to recover, and to rejuvenate yourself, because that's the most important thing. I think health and mental health is the single biggest asset we have, and we should take care that we don't lose that asset.
Great. So JP, would you like to go with that one?
Yeah, I think just to add on to that, I think Asmal did talk about balance, and I think for us it's really about finding the balance and giving us the time to have those boundaries, like not having sort of to go on jump on a Zoom call at 9 p.m. or getting something done. It's about boundaries and sort of making sure that we love ourselves as well, because I think prior to COVID, we probably worked really, really hard and didn't know about it. But now we sort of have the time to slow down. We're sort of the master of our time to some extent. And so we can sort of build that day with a certain balance, leveraging on technology, definitely, but sort of finding that balance and as Asmal put it, sort of if you feel like, yeah, I need a 15-minute break, you know, don't punish yourself, and just go and have that break, and maybe sort of see the sky, you know, go for a walk or something like that, and do something humanistic, right? Just be a human for that moment. And I think that's really important.
And thank you, JP and Evelyn.
I agree with everything they said. I guess the other thing that I want to add is just remember to turn off your technology, your, you know, whatever devices that you're using. Yeah, because I struggle with that. I'll be honest. So I think that's important that we disconnect completely at some point in time. You know, give ourselves that break.
Great. Thank you. And another question here from Alana, specifically to JP. How are the markets coping in the entertainment scene in other parts of Southeast Asia?
Thanks for that, Alana. I'll give you the sort of the current as of today. I think Singapore's sort of got the vaccine sort of down pat. They've sort of controlled it quite well. So we're focused on that. We had plans for Thailand, and Indonesia, and even Taiwan and Australia, and those places have sort of blown up. I think it's important to sort of have someone that's on the ground to sort of understand, not just read the news, but sort of have someone on the ground to understand sort of the severity of COVID in that sector. Because when we go to those markets, really, we are gonna sort of have that investment to bring it over there and spend money. And so we sort of looked at and color coded a lot of our countries within APAC, and focused on the countries that had good governance, good rollouts first, as a very sort of methodical process. So Singapore is obviously one of them. I think at some point in time, Vietnam, surprisingly, was also at a certain level. Taiwan, before the current situation, was also managing it well. And obviously the Chinese market has been a big market that we're sort of planning something over there as well. But sort of in Southeast Asia, Singapore sort of is that leader right now. And that's sort of how we've sort of focused our live entertainment or our family exhibition in Singapore first. I think we've got a lot of confidence from the government side, and as the CEO, I'm sort of very happy with how the vaccine is rolling out, because that sort of give us comfort to our show sort of not just going ahead, but also at an operating capacity that is sustainable for our P&L. Yeah, so those are the things that we're sort of really focused on, to get that launched, fingers crossed, in November this year. We haven't press released anything yet, so I can't do an exclusive here right now.
Well, we hope that does happen in November. I think we're all hoping for that to happen in November.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think there's no more questions, so that brings us to an end for today's session. So I'd like to thank each of you for being part of this session, and I'm going to now pass it over to Sophia.
Thanks, Chris. In fact, if I could, part with this last question, if you could go back to the beginning of the pandemic, what advice would you give yourself? Just a quick comment here. So as well as Chris, do you want to answer this first? I think I don't want to disappoint anybody.
So sorry, could you repeat the question?
Sure. So the question is, if you could go back to the beginning of the pandemic, what advice would you give yourself?
I think pre-pandemic, well, I think it all comes down to people and to the teams. And so I think having a close-knit team and working together and building that trust within a team then helps you to navigate whatever actually comes before the organization. So I really believe that the culture of the organization, having the goals and the KPIs already set, so you're in tune with what has already occurred, that good communication exists within the organization and within your own team, so that as these changes take place, people have the faith to trust each other, just not trusting the organization, but actually trusting each other as well. And then there's good personalization. So building a good, close personal team so that everybody understands what everybody's responsibility is as well. Because during this period of time, I think people are relying on each other because you can't see each other. You're not having that table conversation. You're not having the coffee machine conversation. And so therefore, there's some level of expectation. If you understand what each other's role is, what each other's responsibility is, and how people are actually going to respond in certain situations, then that also helps to then overcome some of these other challenges that occur during this period, where you don't see each other on a daily basis. And when you do need to talk to somebody, generally you've got to make a meeting or you've got to set a specific time apart. It's not just that corridor conversation. So I do believe having clear goals, have everybody understanding what their roles are, and then having good communications, good teamwork, and that personalization that I think everybody touched on to start off with, building good teamwork is very important.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thanks, Chris. For me, I think because we are in the business of community building as well, so I really miss to have that conversation with you, Azmo, JP, and also Evelyn, face to face as much as we could have, like we used to. So Azmo, what do you think? What's your comment?
I generally live life, almost sort of not having any regrets. But if I had to have any regrets, it would be buy tech stocks before they went up during the pandemic. I wish I'd bought more.
Great one. JP, how about you?
I think for me, I probably wouldn't say too much. I think despite the pandemic being where it is, I honestly think, we're sort of better for it to that extent, without taking to the fact that there was a lot of deaths. I think we learned a lot about ourselves in terms of working together, not taking things for granted, slowing down and finding the balance within our lives, and sort of coming together as a community because we have that sort of public enemy or that common adversary. So no, I probably wouldn't even warn myself, actually. Yeah, I was tempted to look at sort of crypto or something like that, but I thought, nah.
We'll have a conversation on that, JP.
Of course.
Well said as well. So Evelyn, how about you?
Well, I think Chris summed it up really nicely. So I guess the only thing, it's more like a note to self is don't waste this, what did I learn, what did I gain, I don't want to miss out on it. I want to make sure I have enough time to introspect. Yeah.
Great, thank you. So I'd like to thank the audience for joining us this evening, and thank you to the panelists, Chris, of course, for taking time to join this webinar and giving your insights and inputs for the future of work. So if any of you would like to be connected, so feel free to reach out to me. And also please fill up the feedback form once you exit from this webinar. So have a good evening and towards the weekend as well. So I'll see you at the next webinar on 29th of July on EdTech in Indonesia. So see you guys. Thank you very much. Have a good evening.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.